Welcome to Rapid Retro, a career-focused shortcast with an agile twist from Agile People Ops. Through this series, we're going to get a glimpse into the careers of leaders, founders and specialists from across the globe, using an old faithful retrospective as a backdrop for our conversations, loved, lacked and longed for. Welcome Martin Mason of Talent Mapper, the CEO and co-founder of Talent Mapper, I should say. It's awesome to have you here on the Rapid Retro podcast. So would you mind just giving a little bit of an overview and intro into who you are and what Talent Mapper does?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Roxy. And thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. Just to give you a kind of quick potted history on us. So as you said, I run an organization called Talent Mapper. And effectively, we are a talent architecture software company, which sounds very lofty, but it's basically a way of kind of organizing and managing talent in a more equitable way within an organization and using technology to assist that, create equity and to remove systemic barriers to entry that are often experienced through traditional talent processes. The reason that's really important to me is I used to work in-house myself. So historically, I've always kind of worked in learning and development, diversity, equity and inclusion and talent management in large blue chip organizations, and was always kind of desperately trying to find a way to make the process more equitable and more accessible for people. Then realized that technology was possibly the answer to do that. And so here we are.
Awesome. I hope that as we go through the retrospective that we get to see a little bit more of the work that you've maybe previously done or are doing through the platform to specifically remove some of those barriers. Let's get started if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. I'm an open book. You can ask anything.
Awesome. So starting off with the loved category then, what are you most proud of in your career at the moment?
Ooh, that's a really tough question. So interestingly, this is something I've had to do an awful lot of work on over the years. So I'm very often proud of my team and the people that I work with, but I've had to work very hard to be kind of proud at my own accomplishments. So I think one of the bits that I am proud of is I can kind of hand on heart say that in all the businesses I've worked in over the years, I've kind of striven to remove systemic barriers in one way or another to entry for underrepresented groups, kind of long before it was trendy and has become the perhaps more fashionable thing to do with organisations now. But I often saw such inequity in organisations, particularly in my kind of formative years when I first started working in HR. There was some, really good people that wanted to do the right thing, but the systems that were in place and the practices around things like recruitment, progression, succession planning often favoured the same types of people. And so, the bit I'm very proud of is to have been able to kind of tear up some of those processes and systems over the years in different businesses to create a bit more equity.
Quite the disruptor there, Martin.
Yes, I've been called that on numerous occasions. I remember once one of the board actually calling me a disruptive little sod in a meeting for that very reason, and that was one of the things I was very proud of.
I'd wear that badge with pride. I love being a disruptor or someone who's shaking the table. Awesome. So if we move into Lacked, then you've had quite a varied career. You've been in-house. You've now got your own organisation as well, doing amazing work, I have to say. What would you change with all the experience that you have now?
Another great question. I would say the main thing is around trusting myself. So this is going to probably sound a bit twee, and I'm a big fan of kind of, self-development and kind of work on self as part of what we do. But I think particularly in my early days in-house, so I'm an openly gay man. I worked in a very, quite a toxic masculine environment in my really early days. And I think because of that, I became quite a people pleaser. So I would often really worry and care about what other people thought rather than kind of trust my instincts or knowledge about what was the right thing to do for people. And I think if I'd cared a lot less what people thought back then and put that extra effort into my work, I could have achieved even more. And so Yeah, I think being less of a people pleaser, trusting instincts, and I think the bit that I've kind of learned in recent years is just to be a bit kinder to yourself. I think there's a lot of people I meet in our profession who are very good at kind of beating themselves with a stick and thinking about all the things they could do better, but actually just kind of learning to practice what we preach a bit more about, kind of well-being and kindness, I think.
Agreed. Yeah, I think sometimes we forget ourselves in that moment. And I was talking to somebody on the podcast a few weeks back around burnout, and the levels of burnout in HR is just, it's really increasing to quite worrying levels. And we seem to be that kind of profession who leave ourselves till the last, and then we kind of learn the lesson because we've fallen off the cliff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I kind of hear you in terms of that people pleasing element, and I wouldn't want to put words in your mouth, but from my own experience, being a minority in the organisations that I've been in, there's often an element of I people please because I want to fit in.
Exactly.
Something that it's taken a long time to shake, and more explicitly kind of the code switching, which luckily I don't have to do in my current organisation, and I get to be my weird, wonderful self. So
Which we love very much, and I do think it's one of those things that we talk about a lot in the profession, where it's everyone I hear now is trying to talk about, oh, you should bring your authentic self to work, and yes, that is where we've got the privilege to do that. It is transformative and makes such a difference to what we're able to do. But there are still so many people that can't do that. It's not that they don't want to, they're not choosing to just go, do you know what? I just don't feel like being my authentic self at work today. But if the culture or the environment's not there and you are, fearful and you've not got that psychological safety, it's really difficult to do that. And I definitely experienced that earlier on in my career. And, going back and have a conversation with younger me, there are definitely ways, there are things I know now that I didn't know then. And I've kind of learned to accept and, like who I am, which I wouldn't have been able to do, starting out in my early days.
100%. It's cliche, but life really is a journey, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
We move into the longed for segment, which is where we're thinking about things that will add more value, give us more fulfillment. It's more on that positive side of things, like what does Martin Mason want more of? What does Talent Mapper want more of?
So the headline for this, for me, is all about kind of removing systemic barriers to equity in businesses. So I really want to see a genuine level playing field and a more equitable environment for people. Fundamentally, that's kind of been in my DNA now for quite some time, and it's the bit that I will tenaciously chase in every role I do. It's kind of the undercurrent of everything that I've been working on. And the other half of that is the byproduct is being able to unlock and kind of liberate people's talents. Inherently, people genuinely do want to do a great job, and unfortunately, often organisations don't realise just how many barriers exist in people's way. I think there's a perception that workplaces are more equitable now, and to some degree that's true, depending on which organisation you work in. But we have the privilege of working with so many different organisations and seeing the vast difference in that spectrum from kind of the equitable to the inequitable, and being able to take out some of those barriers and see people thrive and progress fills me with immense joy. So I guess in terms of what I long for, it is that kind of equal level playing field. And I guess a bit of context on that and the kind of backstory on that as to why that's so important for me. So I kind of the quick potted history is I started my kind of formative early career days working on shop floors as a sales assistant, and kind of worked through to become a store manager quite early on. So I was a store manager by age 19, running some reasonably large teams. In time when you're in those kind of early years, you want to come to work, you want to do a great job, and you don't want to be different necessarily. You just want to be, you want to have your mates at work and get on with people and do a good job. And I watched and observed kind of this like goldfish bowl around me of people, and kept seeing, some incredibly smart, talented people get overlooked because of their demographics as opposed to them as a human being. And I remember very early on kind of that feeling of discontent and thinking, I really want to do something about this. It's not cool, and no one benefits from it. And so I started to put practices in place as a store manager back then to kind of level up the playing field and create more diverse and equitable teams, and really started to address things like diversity, imbalances around ethnicity, disability and gender. And I would love to say that it was strategic back then, but it was kind of almost intuitive rather than planned. And then the spiral started in a positive way where performance increased. We were one of the most profitable stores in the area. Our performance was always in the top of the leaderboard, and people always used to ask, well, what are you doing to achieve this? And at the time I couldn't really answer that question other than, well, I know if you look after people, they'll work well for you, and therefore everybody benefits from that. And then I was lucky enough to kind of progress through over the years into senior management roles in some pretty large businesses, and then started to get involved in things like talent processes and succession planning. And, there were some really good, well-intended people around those rooms doing those talent reviews, but they lacked a structure or a process and the ability to objectively and fairly assess talent. It would often be kind of very conversational about, what do we think about person X, and can we see them doing this job? And I really wanted to probe under that and go, well, hang on a minute, what does success or great look like in that job? How are we measuring these people against that? And therefore, how are we making sure that the process is truly transparent, equitable and fair to give everybody the best possible chance to perform in that? And it was, a real hard labour trying to do that in a few of the businesses, but was very fortunate in my last organisation to have a very forward-thinking board who were up for the challenge and, receptive to that way of thinking. And that was kind of where Talent Mapper was born out of, trying to find a way of systemically changing that through data and technology. And so it kind of leads into that aspiration piece I was talking about at the beginning of, if we can, systemically put those types of processes in place and change that, I really do believe we can achieve a more equitable and fair workplace.
Amazing. What a journey to get to Talent Mapper.
It's interestingly, I was speaking to a former boss of mine this morning, who I worked for quite a number of years ago, more years than I care to admit, if I'm honest. And it really kind of helped ground me, I think, for our conversation today and think about the journey that I've been on over the years. And yeah, it was quite nice actually to look back and take a trip down memory lane.
Nice. Oh, well, I'm glad that this has been quite a reflective exercise. I think that's the key. And yeah, just to call back to some of the things that you've kind of mentioned there in the long form segment, that almost why theory of people not really being underpinned in organisations where people do want to do a good job and are capable, given the right circumstances. And again, where you've sort of outlined that doing the right thing creates the best outcomes for people. So yeah, being able to underpin that with data as well, you can't argue with data. So yeah, it's great to see how Talent Mapper is well, quite frankly, changing the world of work there.
Yeah, we're certainly giving it a good go.
So it wouldn't be a podcast without an extra question. So Martin, do you have a bit of advice for anyone who is daring to do a similar career path to yourself, or thinking about the DEI space from a people perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think for me, it's about. I always try to say to people, do the right thing, which sounds really obvious, but that can be really hard when you're in a D&I or a HR role in house, because you've got pressures coming at you from multiple different angles, depending on the type of business. So you'd be combating shareholders, senior managers, frontline people, your peers, and everyone's got their own agenda and different priorities. But the guiding principle I've always gone with, you can't please all of the people all of the time, but if you do the right thing and champion people along the way, you can look back and be proud of the legacy that you've created behind you. And then I think the second part to that for me is about making sure that when you do progress and you do become a senior leader, is making sure that you create a ladder behind you. I see too often, unfortunately, people that scrabble their way to senior leadership positions and then kind of become the type of people that they've been seeking to influence and change. And I think if we can create an equitable process behind us where we can develop people up and bring them up the ladder to follow us and join us, everyone benefits from that.
100%. So it's like creating future leaders as you progress yourself, like paying it forward.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much. So before I let you go, do you want to just shout out any of your contact details, like where people can find you?
Yeah, of course. So if anyone wants to kind of have a chat around anything to do with inclusive talent or D&I, I'm always up for a conversation about that. So best place is probably on LinkedIn. So after the normal LinkedIn URL, if you do /Martin-Mason, you can reach me there. Just drop me a message and I'll happily get back to you and organise a chat. And then you can find out more about the work that we're doing, particularly with inclusive talent management, on our website, which is www.thetalentmapper.com.
Oh, that is awesome. Thank you so much, Martin, for your time, for your insights, and just to get a window into your world. It's quite a journey you've been on.
Oh, but no, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thank you. Martin shared some brilliant insights into the realities of DEI work and how doing the right thing can create a wave of positive change, which is of course good for business but great for people. His passion for equity and breaking systems down to remove barriers to success for marginalised groups is incredibly inspiring, and I thank him again for taking the time out to discuss his journey and Talent Mapper. If you'd like to see more content from Agile People Ops, then check out their LinkedIn, website, and of course their YouTube. This was the Rapid Retro Podcast. I've been Roxy Allen, and I guess I'll catch you in the next one.